guys, what's going on? Bobby here, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the ATA Network podcast. Today's episode is actually going to be part 2 of my show with Wayne Riegle, and we talked about how he got started in motorsports photography and the superstar racing experience that we were both a part of last year, me on the Skip Barber side and him as the series photographer. So if you missed that first episode, we talked about the first 3 rounds of that SRX series. So if you are tuning into this, haven't listened to that episode, I highly recommend that you go back and listen to that first episode, because some of the things we may talk about in this show may not necessarily make sense. So today we're going to be talking about those last 3 rounds of the SRX show. You're going to want to buckle in because it is going to be a wild ride. So without further ado, let's get into the show. We packed up the hauler at Eldora. We made our way to Lucas Oil Raceway at Indianapolis. What are some stories and things that you remember about going to Indianapolis? This thing that I will mention before I let you kind of dive into it is we were there for a long time because we couldn't get into Slinger because of an event that was going on with the Slinger Nationals. And so we couldn't really get onto the property until I think we may have drove up Thursday or so. I don't remember, but the cars were prepped and ready to pretty much hit the track at practice. Whereas we would pack up the night of the race and pretty much start hightailing it to the next track. At IRP, after the race, we were there for another week is what it felt like. So, what do you remember about being at that Lucas Oil Raceway at Indianapolis?
One word. That's rain.
Oh my God.
I think it rained other than put it this way, the day before race day or the day before practice day, we didn't know if we could get through the pedestrian tunnel, because the water was almost knee deep. And these guys, they earned their paycheck that week, man. They were working nonstop in the rain because of all the carnage that happened at Eldora.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the cars had to be pretty much redone, from top to bottom. Like, there was body shop work going on all over the place. Side note, I'm actually kind of the quasi track photographer at IRP. So I knew that track probably the second most. Eldora and IRP, the only 2 I actually went to before. But I mean, IRP has, we can call it IRP now because they changed the name back.
Mm-hmm.
Before it was Lucas Oil Raceway Park. Now it's the Lucas Oil Oval at Raceway Park or something like that. Yeah, I don't know.
They're doing the thing that Gateway did, where they go from Gateway to Gateway Motorsports Park to Worldwide Technology Raceway at Gateway. But yeah, we can continue.
But they still sold shirts say I still call it IRP, which is I should have one of those shirts. But yeah, with the IRP thing, the coolest thing was the fact that we saw how fast these cars could go, and we saw how it kind of equaled the playing field a little bit, because the winner ended up being, not to kind of spoil it, but Ernie Francis Jr. got his first win.
Mm-hmm.
We saw some heatedness between a couple of the drivers. We saw, which if anyone saw it on TV, you saw that part, and that pretty much to me showed that these aren't just guys out here having the Sunday drive.
No.
They were there, and the coolest thing is you're in Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
That is, to me, growing up in the Midwest, Great Lakes area, that is the center of motorsports. Growing up watching the Indy 500, and that brought out some of those people. And then NHRA, most of the NHRA crews are like based right there in Indianapolis. So we had, Alan Sir Jr. was there, and Antron Brown, but you had another atmosphere. And one of the cool things I think that they did at IRP, which we only did there, was they had like a interview panel for the drivers. Like, the fans got to, they got like they had and his name escapes me right now, but legendary broadcaster with USAC interviewed the drivers, I think 3 or 4 at a time on the front stretch. So it was almost like a little show for the fans, and that was really cool. And probably one of the coolest things was that they had the Indy 500 trophy there with the guy who just won his 4th Indy 500, and Tony Kanaan, also Indy 500 winner, and that was just so cool. And then additionally, I think probably the driver introductions for IRP probably was the most memorable driver's introductions of the whole tour. What do you think?
Oh, dude, I agree. Getting Paul Tracy to get brought in a police car. I mean, the fans were loving it. And to go back on the Castroneves and Kanaan with the Borg Warner, I remember you telling me the morning of the day of like, hey, I hear that they're going to do this thing. Just keep your eyes out. And I remember being like, oh, there they are. And you're like, oh, and then you're like fumbling around. You're trying to shoot it. I don't even know. Did you? I don't even think you got a photo of it, did you?
No, I got it.
Oh, you got it.
I got the shot. Come on.
Oh, dude. But
who you think you're talking to? And what Bobby's referring to is the fact that they had Helio. They had Tony Kanaan driving this first generation Mustang, and Helio in the back seat with the Burt Warner trophy, like just polishing it, and just like it was his baby, because kind of four-time winner there.
Mm-hmm.
He knows it very well. His face is on it 4 times. Driving around the track it was like a pre-race thing or in-race little thing intro, and I just heard these little whispers. That's the cool thing about SRX too. You always hear these like little whispers about, ooh, this person's going to be here, or ooh, they're going to do this thing with CBS, And then, like Bobby said, like seriously, we were just like kind of looking out for it, and then you're just like, oh, there it is. Oh crap! And then just kind of you see this fat guy just run out there and jump over the wall and get I got the shot, man. I got the shot.
Dude, it felt like it was like. I feel like they were they had made like 3/4 of the lap is when we had realized it. So the fact that you had gotten the shot was just absolutely mind blowing. But to tell kind of some of I feel like for whatever reason, Lucas or IRP rather, had a lot more stories to me than a lot of the previous other events. But besides just all the carnage of those cars being tore up, I mean, even if somebody did keep a car clean, the cars were still filthy. Like the outsides of the car, the insides in between the fenders and the wheel wells, decals were still messed up because of just, the clumps of dirt slapping into the side of the car and ripping stuff off of it. So those cars pretty much went, like every single one of them pretty much went through a whole rebuild process. You had mentioned that IRP at this point was the fastest track that we had been on. And it was so fast that they were like breaking rear spoilers and had to like redo the mount for like the middle of the spoiler to keep them splitting in half. The whole SRX crew was really tested during that time at Lucas Oil, just trying to get those cars ready for going back to asphalt. So once again, I will mention props to them for realizing that and putting all the dirt stuff at the end of the schedule, because those cars are going to need a lot more love than what you can give it in 1 week to get it on track. You mentioned one earlier at the top of the show with you getting to race karts at Whiteland. And man, I'll be really quick on it, but Whiteland for me and a lot of the guys that are listening to the show that know all my racing background was the home of my first win in the 206 karts. And so I had been racing at Gateway at the local level for 2 years prior, and I show up to Whiteland, and in my first race at Whiteland, I won. So that track meant a lot to me, and this was my first time back since that time. So to be able to go there and run laps, regardless of how fast or slow I may or may not have been, that being back at Whiteland was so cool. Just that banked corner in the kart track, and you were there. A lot of the other SRX guys were there. I had actually brought Dustin with me. It was like Dustin and Michael Shanes was with us, and Michael Shanes didn't even like get on the karts. He just like slept and wait for us to get done. It was like Dad bringing his 2 kids to the kart track. But no, Whiteland was super fun. me and Adam, another coworker of mine from Skip Barber, we were moving the test cars around, and me and Adam accidentally ran one of the test cars into the awning posts because neither one of us had a hold on the steering wheel, and we like destroyed the fender on the car. And I think it may have actually just came back from getting fiberglass repair done, and it just immediately got pushed back to get the fender repaired on it. I still never got the bill from that, so I think it may have been the first week that we were there. But we got done at the track, and it was me and all the other Skip Barber guys, and Michael Shanes was kind of our main manager in a sense of all the Skip Barber guys, and he kind of rode around with me most of the time that I had my car at these events, just because he didn't want to be, stuck with the van. The van seemed to kind of wander around and, maybe go from bar to bar when we would much rather just go to the hotel and sleep. Kind of what you talked about at Knoxville, or sorry, Eldora. No, Knoxville with Dingus. Yeah.
No, Eldora, I got to sleep in my own bed. Come on, man.
But no, it came down to like everyone wanted to go out to eat. And so I was like looking at places in the Indianapolis area where we could go and eat. And I saw BJ's Brew House. And I've been there before. I actually went, in a different location when I was somewhere else for a race. And I was like, yeah, BJ's sounds really good. And so we all drove to BJ's. And when we pull up in the parking lot and we stop, we see Ray Evernham walking through the front doors by himself. And we're like, well, that's strange. And so we all walk in, and he's at the bar, and I guess he's ordering a drink and some food or whatever. And we're like, Ray, come over here and have dinner with us. And man, the night that we had that night, I think that may rank up as one of the top nights of all of my Skip Barber, maybe not Skip Barber. Yeah, I would throw a whole Skip Barber career in that night. To be able to, I literally sat across from the table from Ray Evernham, and the stories that he told of like, his racing career, and the parts that stand out to me were him talking about where he ran Pikes Peak and his Jeff Gordon stories. I mean, you can imagine what it was like, and that's what it was like. It was just such a crazy, surreal experience. I mean, literally, like for me, this was week 3 of being on the SRX tour, and to be able to sit across the table and have dinner with Ray Evernham, like that's stuff that you can't even dream about, think about even happening. And then let alone, I get thrown into Skip Barber a month later, I'm working for SRX, and 3 weeks into the deal, just all the crazy things that happened. And then the last story, and this is another one of my favorites. What typically would happen for me during the races is I would get kind of paired up with one of the crew teams. Each of, there was like a group of like a pit crew that serviced the 3 vehicles during the break between the 2 heat races. And, we would do things like maybe change tires if we needed to, things of that sort, maintenance the cars, working on them. And Bill Elliott was actually one of the drivers that was in our pit area. And my job was simply to check the torque on the tires, take the torque wrench, go around to all the 5 lugs on, each tire of these 3 cars, Bill Elliott being one of them. Bill Elliott goes out and he he gets on the radio and he reports that he's got a loose wheel. And I don't remember who the main SRX crew guys were, but they came over to me and they felt like they were 20 feet tall. And they looked down at me and they're like, did you check the tires on Bill's car? And I'm like, yes. Like, I feel like I probably went around and like checked the torque on 8 lugs, right? I went so far in around that I wanted to make sure that the torque was fine on all the tires. And they're like, are you sure that you checked the torque on Bill Elliott's tires? And at this point, I'm questioning myself, right? Because then they tell me that he's got a loose wheel, and I'm like, oh no. And you go back and watch the broadcast, and like Alan Bestwick's talking about it, and he's like, yeah, I think they might have missed the lug on the tire. He's got a loose wheel. So now Alan Bestwick is calling me out on the broadcast too. Not directly, obviously. But in my mind, I'm like, oh my God. I'm the reason that Bill Elliott has a loose wheel. He could potentially die out there because I didn't make sure his wheel was on properly. And fortunately or unfortunately, fortunately for me, he came in, they checked the tire, ended up actually being a hub problem and not a loose wheel. But man, can I tell you, the list of things that has stressed me out the most in my life, that is another one that ranks up there in probably the top 3 of being like, oh my God, I can't believe I almost killed Bill Elliott. So what was some of your favorite memories from IRP?
Just how like Casey and Tanner, two of the big guys that are kind of restoring the luster of the IRP, and just how like welcoming they were, and just how like excited everybody was about that. The racing with the emotion of Ernie Francis Jr. winning that race, and seeing his dad. You were talking about dads in racing, and then his dad and his stepmom were there at every track. And there's another thing that a lot of people don't realize with Ernie Francis Jr. He was not just racing with us; he was actually racing Trans Am. So for most of those races, he was going from like Road America. I think maybe that weekend they were at Road America, but they was worked actually kind of cool, kind of well, and actually worked for me kind of cool. Was when we were at Eldora, because Trans Am was at Mid Ohio, and I actually went and shot the Trans Am race at Mid Ohio the day after Eldora, which was pretty awesome. Yeah, like the racing was pretty good with IRP. My biggest takeaway from IRP was the day after the races, which was July 4th. And during like the morning of the race, one of the crew guys, SRX crew guys, said, "Hey, when are you going back home?" Because I was kind of going back home every week. I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to leave tomorrow on Sunday." It's like, "Oh, okay. Well, we're going to go out to the museum, IMS. We're going to go to the Indy Museum." I'm like, "Oh, that'd be sweet." It's like, "Okay, well, it's like $5-10 to get in." It's like, "Okay, I'm cool." It's like, "Oh, no, we're going to get in." Oh, okay. So we're getting like a private tour. I'm like, "Oh, that's really cool. Okay, yeah, I'm done. Just put me down. Put me down for that. I'm there." The morning of, go and trying to kill some time and get to the racetrack a little early to the museum, and I get out of my car. I see your guys' the buses come, or the vans come in, and there's Bobby. He's there. It's like, okay, cool. Bobby's here, and just kind of, and then all of a sudden, out off in the distance, there's Ray Everingham. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm like processing this through my head. I'm like, so I'm gonna go to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum with Ray Everingham? Is this what's happening? This is what happened in my life, right? And I'm going to take pictures of this. Okay, let's go. So, and it was the coolest thing, because the tour guide, who was great and very knowledgeable, would tell us stuff and then look at Ray, and then Ray would tell us more.
Mm-hmm.
He would have all these, he was telling the stories about like when they went, him and Jeff Gordon were there for the tire test for the first Brickyard, and he would go and tell us the history of, okay, this car right here, it's cool because this and this, and if you look under here, and just telling its ins and out engineering stuff. And to me, one of the coolest things in the museum, if anyone's ever been in the museum, there's in the back wall, it's just a list of everyone who's won there at the Speedway. And he stops, looks at the list, and he goes, "Okay, guys, read all these names, and then read all the names of the people that we work with right now on SRX, and how many of those names are on that board. Bill Elliott, Helio, Tony Kanaan, and not even to mention the fact that like Todd Parrott and all the guys who've won either in a NASCAR series or IndyCar or whatever, or somebody who got third place there in a Skip Barber race, kind of foreshadowing that a little bit. But it was so cool. And then Willie T. Ribbs, we haven't even talked about Willie T. Ribbs yet, who is like the most intimidating teddy bear you've ever seen. He has his own little thing right there, it's Willie
Mm-hmm.
T. And just like the history, like walking around, because I'm a big history guy in general, and I'm a big racing history guy, and being in that place with somebody who was a part of that, like a part of that history, showing us around, was just the coolest thing. And then going out on the track, kissing the bricks and all that fun stuff, and taking a picture of all you guys standing in front of the pagoda. And that was just like a really cool thing that was not really, it was planned, but it wasn't really planned. And then we went out to Whitelands, and you guys kicked my butt in the carts. But yeah, that was my biggest thing about IRP, was that day after, because it was, I don't know, it was just like one of those surreal moments where you're like, okay, if I thought I was going to wake up on my way, wake up on my way out to Stafford, I knew right now that okay, that alarm's going to go off any minute, and this can't be real. I can't. I'm living someone else's life right now.
Yeah, I mean that museum trip in itself for me too. I look at it the exact same way. I mean, it was just you're literally going through history with one of the guys that helped write the history books. It was literally insane. Talk about insane. The next track we went to being Slinger Speedway. This track is unlike anything we've ever seen before. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before. Just the banking on the back straightaway, how small that is, the bull ring that it is. What a racetrack Slinger Speedway was. I think the racing at that track, I mean, it was definitely one of the best races of the season in my mind. What were some of your favorite moments of Slinger Speedway?
Yeah, Slinger was awesome. It reminds me a lot of Anderson Speedway in Anderson, Indiana, where the Little 500 is. Even more insane than that. And anyone who's ever been there, that place is pretty insane. That was cool because another instance where the local guy kind of shined came out, and that was the first instance too where that like local hero, I forget what they actually called it, spot was up to another race. The reason why you guys stayed in Indy for so long is they had the Slinger Nationals,
Mm-hmm.
and the winner of the Slinger Nationals got that spot. And they're doing the same thing again this year with Stafford. Is the winner of I think it's like called the Spring Sizzler big block modified race is going to get that spot when they go to Stafford this year. Luke Fenhouse was the guy, and he almost won the darn thing. If it wasn't for a late race caution, someone wrecked. He was going to be the one to win that race. But in the meantime, the guy who did win the race, Marco Andretti, like coming out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you what, he was so excited for that win. What's funny is because Marco gets a bad rap, but if you think about what he's had to live up to with having such the name and being the next person, that's a lot of pressure. But he was just so like great sense of humor and just like messing with me a lot. He came up after Victory Lane there, and he grabs me. He goes, "Get me those pictures now." From Victory Lane and stuff. And I'm like, dude, okay, I'm gonna get it. I got it. Like my hotel's like 20 minutes down the road. I got you. It was so funny. But yeah, Slinger, man, like just walking that track was an ankle breaker.
Yeah.
It was just so high banked, and it was just like it was almost like a skateboard thing where like they're dropping in when the cars went down. Johnny Benson, who was the pace car driver, actually took me a lap in the pace car there, and I felt like and we were going like 20 miles an hour or 30 miles an hour, and I felt like I was going to fall out of the car because it was just so banked. And just watching the SRX guys, the logistics people try to put up the banners and stuff was kind of fun too, because bannering the walls and stuff and trying to stay on both feet without rolling down that banking was cool. But another place where the crowd was just amazing, like how many people just came out to support this. And I think that was also the first race that Tony Uri Jr. was one of the crew chiefs. And Tony Uri Jr., shoot, there's a bunch of history with that guy too. And he was super nice. But yeah, with Slinger, what was cool, it was almost like a boxing ring, right? And at Slinger, Willie T. Ribbs at the drivers meeting actually gave Ray Everingham some boxing gloves because of it being like that kind of a boxing ring, kind of like short track stuff, and then all the stuff that happened at IRP with a little bit tempers flaring, which is racing's racing, man. And so that was kind of cool too. The drivers meetings were actually kind of funny because the guys were just like kind of relaxing, but at the same time they were just like picking on each other. So that was always fun.
It was very much like the racing on track was legit, but it was a very laid back series outside of the cars. Like all these guys are already, I mean, not all of them, but most of these guys are already accomplished drivers, right? With really nothing to, prove. So they can be buddy buddy, but once you put a helmet on a guy like, for example, Castro Neves or Labonte, you're gonna get a racer out of them. But no, Slinger Speedway was super cool. Like you mentioned, I remember driving the Skip Barber golf cart around the track to be able to go hang out banners. And like you said, dude, I felt like I was gonna flip that thing going down the banking. Like even just driving straight down it to get to the bottom of it, I did not feel safe at all. But they put on a great show, and the fans there, like you said too, just an electric crowd from a small little town in Wisconsin up there. My little fortunate story, and I'll be real brief with this one as well. So there's actually a karting family up there in Wisconsin, the Palmasanos, and they knew that I was going to be up there for the SRX event, and they invited me to one of their local track races up there at Badger Kart Club. So it was and I'm sure you remember, it was just a really late night getting out of Slinger. Like the fans had like flooded the garage area and were trying to get autographs and stuff, and it was just chaos trying to pack out of there. I think I hit the bed at the hotel room at like 1 or 2 a.m. and my alarm went off at like 5:30 or 6 a.m. to go make it to a kart race because I tried, I saw an opportunity to go kart racing. And so it was like, Sunday was my day to kind of travel to get home. And it's like, I'll sacrifice this to go racing at a local track and to be able to hang out with them. And that was definitely one of my favorite parts of, being up there in Wisconsin. But the racing that they put on the night before at Slinger Speedway was nothing to nod your head away from. It was a really good show. I'm kind of upset that it's not going back there in 2022.
Yeah, there's definitely no time to breathe at that place. But yeah, like I said, most of these, all of them actually, the fan base was people are just coming out of the woodwork, and it was great. I mean, cheering and booing, and it just electric. It was all electric. I do remember you saying something about that, and you were trying to talk me into going shooting that race for you. And I was like, when do I get it? No,
Yeah.
no, I'm good.
I mean, even for me racing in it was still like a question of, is it worth not sleeping at all tonight? And working these SRX events, it's not like, you're not doing anything. It's a physical day. Whether you're shooting photos or you're a crew chief on the car, you're on your feet all day long, literally all day, sweating your butt off, just busting it just to get through it all. Super long days. To be able to wake up and off of minimal sleep to go racing after that, it was not the easiest thing. But you do mention, the fan base, and we go from this small little track in Wisconsin to Nashville, Tennessee, to the Nashville Fairgrounds, another track where that crowd was just electric. Kind of walk me through what you experienced there on that finale round of the SRX series.
So yeah, Nashville was cool. I'm a big classic country music fan, especially like the outlaw stuff. So going to Nashville was definitely a big thing. And then with kind of like our IRP, Nashville, the fairgrounds track has all kinds of history, going back to when Darrell Waltrip started there, and even back farther than that to shoot, I forget the name now. God darn it. The singer Marty Robbins. Yeah, a lot of history there with Darrell Waltrip, and all the way back to Marty Robbins, who was a country music star who also raced there. Would race there until his time is up at the Grand Ole Opry, and it was great just to kind of be part of that that track's history. And not only that, like we had the like pro late models there, and Cody Swanson was racing there too, so we had a little bit of connection with that. And who was racing? Who was our special guest that weekend? None other than the NASCAR champion, Mr. Chase Elliott. I mean, Bill Elliott and Chase Elliott racing for the first time against each other.
Oh man,
that was awesome. one kind of side note as a photographer that's kind of funny is Getty Images also shot with me like race day stuff, and always shot with the track photographer. And I always tried to be very cordial with the track photographer because that means it's their track. I don't want to step on their toes. So we're in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm from Ohio. The track photographer is from Ohio. The guy from Getty lives in Ohio. So all three of us are like Ohio centric, and we're 2 states away in Nashville. And I thought that was the funniest thing. And I live off of I-75. The track photographer lives in Dayton, which is off I-75, and the guy from Getty was living in Cincinnati off it was like an I-75 crew. So I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, that crowd was like on race day. We didn't hit the track. You guys didn't hit the track for practice until I think like 10 or 11. And there were people waiting to try to see the drivers at like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. There was already people there. And if you don't think that's electric, I mean, that's crazy. Like that people are just like standing and they were just, applauding and when they saw their favorite person, and all these drivers were coming out and they're meeting with the fans, signing autographs, high-fiving, taking selfies and all that. No one wanted my autograph or anything. And I don't like people to take my selfie because it might end up on the most wanted list or something. So but yeah, that was just one of those things where it was such a big event. It's one of those things where it's like the last day of school, though. At the same time, it's like you don't want this roller coaster to end, but at the same time, man, you just need a breath to take it all in. But yeah, the biggest takeaway for me from Nashville was getting, and goes back when we started out, this whole father-son thing, is getting to see Bill and Chase be able to race against each other, and seeing them in fire suits with each other, because I'm used to, like, I've seen Chase race ever since he was in late models, and in the K&N series, and then at that time was Xfinity Nationwide series, but now the Xfinity series, and then Cup. So I got to see him go up, just kind of like with Larson. I got to see him go up. I never worked for him, but still I got to see him. And just seeing Bill be on the sidelines for most of that, being his spotter, being his driving coach, just kind of being there for him, being the dad. And now you get to see him not just be the dad, but be the fellow racer, and just the smiles on their faces. Oh, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. Just that interaction that they were having was just the coolest thing. It made that weekend really special, not just because we're going to crown the champion and it's the last race and where we're at, but that father-son thing, and that was it. That was the coolest thing. And then they ended up being on the front row together and finishing 1 and 3. I think Bill finished third, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Tony
finished runner up.
Yeah. So that was the coolest thing. And then I'll tell you one little side note story too, which was hilarious. And this is you'll like this one because it's a good Tony Stewart story. And so Goodyear was this tire supplier, and I tried to be very cordial with everybody and try to get to know everybody because I'm a people person. And I got to know some of the Goodyear guys, and one of the Goodyear reps came over to me. He goes, "Hey, just so you know, when we do Victory Lane, whoever wins the championship, we have a special hat for them to wear." I'm like, "Okay, cool. Make sure you get a picture of that hat, the hat, and then get it to Goodyear." Like, okay, I can do this. I got little side assignments every race. And so we go Victory Lane. Somebody hands Chase Elliott the hat. I'm like, "Oh no, that's the hat, right? I got to get Tony in that hat. He won the championship." So I'm like, "Oh crap, now what do I do?" Get Victory Lane, which Victory Lane was chaotic. And so get Victory Lane done, and I run over to, I forget who it was. I was like, hey, where's that hat that Chase had on? "Oh, you mean this one?" I'm like, "Yeah." I take the hat nicely. Take the hat, and Tony's walking away, and just everyone's high-fiving each other, and just like, yeah, we did it, and all that kind of stuff. We survived. And I'm running down, and I'm like, I gotta confront Tony Stewart and ask him to take the picture with his hat. This is gonna be interesting. So I run Tony down. I'm like, hey, Tony, I need to do a favor. And all these people are coming in trying to ask for his autographs. I'm like, oh yeah, this makes it even more fun.
Right.
And he's signing the autographs and stuff, no big deal. And I go, hey, Tony, I need you to do me I need you to do a favor. I need a picture of you with this hat. And I'm thinking he's gonna be like, blow me off or whatever, or whatever, or at least mess with me a little bit. He goes, okay, where do you want to go? We go over on the side of one of the haulers that's just white, and we go and snap. It's like, cool, we're done. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. It was like this. The thing, like you were saying, is we made this connection because Tony Stewart's always been like a really big. I've been a fan of his ever since he was in IRL days.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, ever since he was in USAC, really, to be honest with you, winning the Triple Crown and everything. Because I'm that old. And anyway, so we just made these connections. And sometimes the fun thing about the SRX thing is sometimes you might not get that, this famous person knows who I am until those moments like that. Like one time I was just standing around, and Jeff Hammond came over and punched me in the stomach. Now, not like to hurt me, but just playing around.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking to a friend of mine when we do that, and he's like, what the heck was that about? I was like, oh, that's just Jeff being Jeff. I was like, I'll give them back later. I wouldn't do that, but it was just cool like that. We just got to the point where we were on the road together for 6 weeks, and by the end of the tour, we were just kind of like a family road trip, So with Nashville, that's, to me, Nashville was that last trip. It was like graduation. The graduation ceremony was at Victory Lane, and we all survived it, and we got through it, and we got some bruises and some scars from it. But at the end of the day, man, it was just the coolest ride ever.
That's the best way I think you could have summarized it right there. I mean, it was a tremendous amount of hard work, and in the moment, you may not really experience this happiness and joy. But when you stop and you think about what just happened, especially at the end of Nashville, right? Because you're not just looking over Nashville, you're looking at the entire season, and you're like, I cannot believe that just happened. Kind of the same kind of thing you were talking before, like, okay, and am I going to wake up from my dream now, after this is all over? And then you go back, and it was crazy for me because, like, I would still get pointed out in the broadcasts being in the background back at home. And then you get like text messages of people being like, I saw you on CBS this evening. Like, just crazy, crazy things. Nashville for me was the event that I think I worked the hardest physically. I ended up being one of the Skip Barber guys to help out with Goodyear, because we would have to pretty much move, a set of tires for every single race car, to the pit lane for practice. And then take the set of tires back to Goodyear, and then put like 2 sets of tires back on pit lane per car for the race. So it was like me and literally 2 other guys moving all these tires for all these cars, including the test cars. And physically, it was like the most I've ever worked at one of these SRX races. We talk about the father-son connection, and it was cool to have my dad there for this. And to be able to kind of bring him along and give him kind of the hot pass experience of being able to be at SRX. I was there, it was after practice, and Tony was talking to Ray on the pit lane. So it was after all the cars were, getting brought back to the paddock area that we were working on them, and Ray and Tony were talking, and Tony started walking back to the garage area, and it's like, Dad, we're hopping over the pit wall, and we're going to go talk to Tony Stewart. And we walked the entire length of the pit lane wall, and me, my dad, and Tony Stewart had a conversation of like, I've been working with you these past 6 weeks, and, super grateful for the opportunity. And, we met you back when you won the Indianapolis race, and we were at the fan club banquet thing, and kind of like fangirling. And that's not something that you want to do in this situation, but to kind of to be able to return it to my dad, I felt like I had to kind of do that kind of thing. And, I don't regret doing that at all. And it was another cool thing too, because I got my dad a photo with Tony, but then I also got my dad a photo with Ray. And we didn't really stick around to have a conversation with Ray, but Ray started a conversation with us. And Ray said something to my dad about like, your son's a real hard worker and he was a real good asset to this. And like in that moment, I was just like, what? It's like Ray just said that about me. Like I barely lifted a finger compared to all these other guys. Like that was another surreal moment. And then I obviously can't forget mentioning my two other media friends, Greg Dingus and Mark Schwagen. They actually was able to get them in too to kind of produce some of their own content to kind of build their own resumes as well. So all in all, it was a really cool event. I got to hang out with them kind of away from the track as well. And same thing with my dad. And, just to be able to have that event and to be able to kind of bring it all together for the SRX series. And like I said, moving all those tires for Goodyear and kind of putting forth all the physical effort and mounting those tires as well. It was just an absolute surreal experience for me to, I'm a media guy, right? There's guys that go to, these NASCAR institutes so that way they can eventually be a pit crew member for, NASCAR Cup. And here I am as a media guy working for Skip Barber and literally putting tires on cars. Like it was just such a really cool experience. And it checked the box off my list that I never thought I would check. So in conclusion, and I kind of wrap up my little full SRX thing looking back at it, what an amazing experience it was for me. I still look back at it and I have to pinch myself and look back at photos to even believe that it happened. Super thankful to be able to rub elbows with a lot of these legends, but also thankful for making friendships and memories. And, one of those friendships I'm really thankful is meeting you because, I'm really excited to see kind of what, we're both individually able to do together this year. It's been really cool. After SRX, I had you at Mid-Ohio and then at Indianapolis for my Skip Barber races, and you actually were able to take photos of me behind the wheel. So it was super cool to be able to have you there for those events, not just as, a media support, but also just as a friend to be able to hang out. It was cool to be able to share that moment. One of the biggest moments of my racing career was being on the podium at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I mean, that's another thing that I just, from my background's not being able to think I would ever do, and to be able to have you there and be able to get a photo with you, you don't really get a photo with the photographer that often. The photographer is kind of always the guy that, people don't really think about that kind of work and how much actually goes into it. And I wasn't going to miss an opportunity to get a photo with you and to be able to kind of, have something to remember us being there together. I wasn't going to make you take all the photos. So it was really cool to get that photo with you there, and the Superstar Racing experience, super awesome time that we had. What are some of your takeaways from the whole 2021 SRX season?
Just being able to spend 6 weeks with some of my racing heroes and then to call some of those guys like, my friends now, what I mean? Like being able to, I'm going to go down and shoot a couple races with Bobby Labonte in the Smart Big Block Modified series. And if you would have told me that last year now that, oh yeah, you get to go hang out with Bobby Labonte and shoot Big Block Modifieds, sponsored by Cookout, one of my favorite places to eat when I'm down in the South.
Amen.
I'm like, you got to stop what you're smoking there, you
Right.
gotta
Right.
come back to reality, or like, Helio, I've messaged him every once in a while. It got to the point though, I'll tell you, like a little side, where my wife would just bust my chops and be like, if I would talk about SRX stuff, she'd go, is that heavy? I'm like, was what heavy? She goes, you've been dropping a lot of names lately, are they heavy? I'm like, yeah, it's hard to not drop names when you're surrounded by such, legends. And like I said, even the friendships, like you were saying, I'll repeat that to the day I die, that like that's what motorsports is about, is about the friendships and the connections and the memories that you make. Races come and go, but those friendships and those connections you make are hopefully forever. And then kind of putting a bow on it, is that, like I said, that father-son stuff. I mean, we had you and your dad, which that was cool on the SRX, and even cooler at more cool at Indy when he was there for the Skip Barber stuff. That was awesome. Ernie Francis Jr. and Senior seeing that, Bill Elliott and Chase seeing that. and then seeing, Ray had his daughter with him, and Aaron
Mm-hmm.
Abraham, and seeing that the family thing. And that's the thing, is like all this family stuff. That was just so cool to see that, and see these people who, I admired from afar, drivers, and even some of the celebrities. Like we had John Oates from Hall and Oates at Nashville, and he was like the coolest guy ever too. Um, and just seeing them as humans, seeing them, waking up, and I'm not going to name names, but seeing a certain driver get out of his RV in the morning, and just looking like I do, and I work, get in the morning, and someone that's been on TV a lot,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just like, oh, so they're like us. You're These people are like us. They just can drive a race car really fast, really well. Um, so that's my big takeaway, is just how awesome. Like, I mean, there's no other way to put it, that 6 weeks was, and how surreal it was, and how much I appreciate the opportunity that they gave me last year, picking me up from obscurity, some dirt track sprint car photographer that doesn't have a big social media presence, and just kind of shows up to the race, takes pictures, and posts them, into this series that's full of superstars racing for this big experience. Maybe that's where they got the name.
Maybe.
Maybe. But yeah, just being a part of it, and it's just a small part of it, and just knowing that my photos that I took are for the most part, the archive of that first season.
All right, Wayne. So that's gonna do it for this episode. We've now covered the entire SRX season, our experiences from it, and we talked about you a little bit in that first part. So, here at the end of the show, I want to give you an opportunity. Where can people follow your journey on the socials?
Okay, on the socials, on Twitter and Instagram for my race stuff, it is Riegle Photography. It's RIEGLE photos, on those. And then if you want to see some pictures of some very cute animals, on the Twitter, it is at Photos Zoo. And then on Instagram, it is at Riegle Zoo. So RIEGLE Zoo.
Awesome, Wayne. And I can't thank you enough for being here on the show. Really cool to kind of go back and talk about all that cool fun that we had this past summer, and fingers crossed that we can do it again next year. So super thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you, Bobby, and thank you for your friendship.
No, thank you, dude. I mean, that's what it's all about, man. If you can do all these cool things, but if you don't have the connections, the friendships at the end of the day, I mean, that's what really makes it what it is. That's really the substance of the pie. So can't thank Wayne for coming on the show enough. And like I usually do at the end of these shows, I just want to remind everybody that if you want to support the show that you love to tune into, check out shopatanetwork.com. That's where you can find merch, ATA Network specific or podcast specific merch, to be able to purchase that, represent the show, and be able to help us kind of get this out there to you guys on the airwaves. So that's going to be it for this episode, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you guys on the next episode of the ATA Network podcast.